My mother packed my life in trash bags and called me a moocher in a house I'd been paying for. I didn't argue. I called a lawyer. She had no idea what my father had done 6 years ago. I came home from a 12-hour shift to find my entire life stacked in trash bags at the end of the driveway. Not a bag or two. Not a box of stuff someone had meant to drop off. Every single thing that made that house feel like mine. My work files in a crumpled grocery sack. My grandmother's quilt folded wrong and stuffed into a black hefty bag. My grandfather's framed photograph face down on the concrete. All of it. Arranged in a neat row like someone had taken pride in the eviction. Like they'd wanted me to see it from the street before I even got out of the car. I sat in my Honda Accord for a full 45 seconds. Engine running. Air conditioning on. Staring at the pile. Then I looked up at the porch. My mother, Delia, stood there with her arms crossed and her chin lifted in the way she did when she'd already decided she was right about something. She was wearing her good cardigan, the cream one she saved for church and confrontations, and she had the particular expression I'd spent 30 years learning, meant there would be no negotiation. My younger sister Keely leaned against the porch railing, dark hair freshly blown out, wearing a linen blouse I didn't recognize. And beside her, one hand resting on the doorframe of my front door, stood Brent, her husband of 6 weeks. He was already in socks. He'd already taken his shoes off inside my house. I turned off the engine, walked up the driveway, stopped at the foot of the porch steps. "What is this?" I asked. My voice came out very flat, very quiet. I've learned over the years that the quieter I get, the worse it actually is. But nobody in my family ever learned to read that signal. Keely and Brent need a real bedroom, Delia said. No hello, no sorry. They can't live in that little room on the side. You'll take the basement. That's my room, I said. The one on the right, off the hallway, with the attached bathroom I paid to have remodeled 18 months ago. That's my room. Keely made a face. The particular face she'd been making at me since approximately 1999. You're 30 years old, Marin. Stop acting like a child about square footage. Something cold moved through my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something more precise than anger, like a dial turning. I pay the mortgage on this house, I said. I pay the utilities, the property insurance, the property taxes. I paid to replace the water heater last February. I paid to reshingle the back half of the roof in the spring. I looked at Brent. I've never met you before in person. You were at the wedding for 4 hours. Your shoes are off in my house. Brent smiled. He had the smile of someone who'd grown up being told he was charming and had never been seriously contradicted. Hey, Marin, I get it. Change is hard. But this is family. This is property, I said. Delia came down one step. Her finger came up, the pointed finger, the one she'd used to scold me through every bad grade and bad decision and bad boyfriend since I was 8 years old. That does not make you the head of this family. You are a daughter in this house. Daughters do not dictate. I am the person whose bank account has kept the lights on for 3 years, I said. I want my things put back. I pushed past Brent. He actually sidestepped out of the way, which I noted, and walked into the house, down the hallway, through the door of my room. My drawers had been pulled out and dumped into cardboard boxes. My desk had been wiped clean. Keely's overnight bag was already on the bed I'd bought with my own money at a furniture store 17 months ago, and a framed photo of Keely and Brent's wedding, taken by a photographer I'd helped pay for, was already propped on the windowsill where my grandfather's clock used to sit. I stood in the middle of the room for a moment, then I walked back to the hallway. Delia was inside now. She'd followed me in, and she was standing near the kitchen doorway with her arms still crossed, and the look on her face was something I can only describe as satisfied, like she'd been preparing for this, like she'd practiced. Put my things back, I said. No, she said. Simple as that. Like it was obvious. Like I'd asked her to do something absurd. I will call a lawyer. She laughed. Keely laughed. Brent looked at the ceiling. Bullshit, my mother said. Get out, moocher. The word landed like a slap. Moocher. Me. The woman whose automatic bank transfer had hit that mortgage account on the 14th of every month for 3 years without a single late notice. The woman who'd called the plumber, scheduled the HVAC inspection, renewed the homeowner's policy, argued with the insurance company for 2 months when a tree limb cracked the back fence during a storm. Moocher. The whole street went quiet. Or maybe it was just inside my head. Either way, the silence was absolute. I looked at my mother, then at Keely, who was already drifting back toward the bedroom she decided was hers, then at Brent, who was examining his phone like none of this was relevant to him. They weren't afraid of what I might do. They had never for 1 second considered that I might actually leave. I picked up my phone. I walked back through the front door. I got in my car, and I made one call. I need to back up, because you need to understand the shape of the thing before you understand how badly they'd miscalculated. My father, Raymond Cullum, died 4 years ago February. Cancer. The aggressive kind that moves fast and doesn't negotiate, and he was gone in 7 months from diagnosis to the end. He was the kind of man who read every document twice before signing it, who kept a fireproof box under his bed, who had opinions about the difference between a will and a trust that he would share with you unsolicited if you gave him an opening. He was the kind of man who prepared. My mother, Delia, was the kind of woman who let someone else do the preparing and then assumed the results would naturally be in her favor. For as long as I could remember, my mother and sister operated as a unit. Keely was the pretty one, the funny one, the one who got the slack and the passes and the benefit of every available doubt. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who had always, since approximately age 12, been treated as a resource rather than a child. I paid for things. I fixed things. I showed up when things needed showing up for. for. I didn't complain because I'd learned, slowly and then all at once, that complaining produced nothing in our family except a lecture about gratitude. When my father died, the house, a 3-bedroom craftsman in a good school district, paid down to about 60% of its original mortgage, became the central question. Delia couldn't afford to carry it alone. Her part-time bookkeeping work covered her car payment and her credit cards, and not much else. Keely was 26 and between jobs, which was a condition she treated as a personality rather than a problem. I was pulling a solid income as a financial compliance analyst. I had savings, I had stability, I had, apparently, a face that people looked at when they needed someone to absorb a problem. So I stepped in, I took over the mortgage payments, I added myself to the accounts, I started paying the bills. Everyone nodded like this was natural, logical, the obvious solution, and not a single person in my family used the words "thank you" with any consistency. What I did not know, what nobody had bothered to tell me, or perhaps thought to tell me, or perhaps had strategically not told me, was what my father had done when he refinanced the house 6 years before he died. I had not known until I was sitting in the parking lot of a Shell station on Route 9 at 11:47 p.m., with my grandmother's quilt in my back seat and my hands shaking on my steering wheel, that my name was on the deed. But Warren Bell knew. Warren Bell had been my father's attorney for 20 years. He was 63, methodical, the kind of man who wore bow ties unironically and kept handwritten notes in a leather journal, and never, in my experience, showed urgency about anything. He showed urgency that night. "Warren," I said when he picked up. My voice was steadier than I expected. When my father refinanced, whose name ended up on the deed, I heard papers, filing drawers, the careful rustle of someone who kept physical copies of everything because he didn't entirely trust servers. "Yours," he said. "Your father added you as a co-owner. He came in specifically for that purpose." He said. Warren paused, and I could hear him reading from something. He said you were the only one in the family who understood money, and he didn't want the house to become a source of conflict after he was gone. I sat very still for a moment. "My mother just threw my belongings in the driveway of a house I've been paying for," I said. "She called me a moocher in front of the street." Warren was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Don't go back tonight," he said. "Not for any reason. Go somewhere safe, and then I need you to send me every payment record you have. Every mortgage transfer, every utility payment, every tax receipt, every repair invoice, every photograph you can take of that driveway. Send everything. Tonight, Marin. Now, if possible." "Warren, you are a co-owner of that property," he said very clearly. "What happened tonight was not a family disagreement. Go." I went. I checked into a Comfort Inn off the highway. $89 a night, cable TV, vending machine down the hall, and I sat on the scratchy bedspread with my laptop and I sent Warren Bell 12 months of financial documentation in 2.5 hours. Mortgage payment confirmations, utility auto pay receipts, the homeowner's insurance renewal invoice, the property tax payment I'd made in October, the plumber's invoice from March, the roofer's contract from the spring, the Home Depot receipt for the water heater, every Venmo to the handyman who'd come 4 times to fix things. All of it. At 2:14 a.m., my phone showed 17 missed calls. 9 from Keely, 6 from Delia, 2 from a number I didn't recognize that was almost certainly Brent calling from Keely's phone, because I'd never given him mine. I did not call any of them back. I put the phone face down on the nightstand, and I stared at the water stain on the ceiling, and I tried to feel something clean, something simple. What I actually felt was a strange, humming calm, like the eye of something. Warren called at 8:32 the following morning. I'd slept 4 hours. I was on my second cup of terrible in-room coffee. "There's more," he said. His voice had a quality I hadn't heard before. Careful, deliberate, like he was choosing each word with both hands. "What kind of more?" "Your father left a letter, sealed, to be opened only in the event of a dispute over the property. He deposited it with me separately from the will. I've had it for 6 years." He paused. "Marin," he anticipated this. My throat tightened. "What does it say?" "Among other things, it outlines his intentions regarding your role as co-owner. He establishes that if Delia ever attempted to remove you from the property, deny you access, or take unilateral action regarding the home without your consent," another pause, "the trust governing his estate allows for an immediate petition to force a sale. The house would have to go on the market. Delia would receive her portion of the proceeds, but she would have no further claim on the property itself." The coffee went cold in my hand. "She moved a man I've met once into my room," I said, "while I was at work. She packed my belongings in trash bags. Then she made," Warren said, "a very expensive mistake." By noon that day, Warren had filed for emergency injunctive relief with the county court. By 2:15 p.m., he had served formal notice to the address. By 3:00 p.m., my phone was producing a sound I'd never quite heard it make before. Continuous. Overlapping. A buzz that didn't stop. Keely called 11 times. Delia called 8. Brent called twice from Keely's number, which was 2 more times than he had any basis to call me. A text from an unknown number read, "This is Brent. Call your mom. She's crying." I looked at it for a long time. Then I put the phone back down. Delia's voicemail. "Marin, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you got a lawyer involved over a room. A room, Marin? Call me back. A room." She was still calling it that. Delia's text. 40 minutes later. "You are humiliating this family." I typed back one sentence. I thought about it for about 4 minutes, and then I sent it. "You humiliated me on your porch while standing in a house I paid to keep." Then I turned my phone face down again, and I ordered a sandwich from the hotel restaurant, and I watched the news for an hour, and I felt, for for the first time in a very long time, like I was standing on solid ground. The meeting was set for 2 days later. Conference room on the 4th floor of a downtown bank building. Dark wood table, good chairs. The kind of room that has a water pitcher in the center and nobody drinks from it. Warren had arranged it. Neutral ground, his suggestion, and I understood why. He'd also brought Carla Reston, a paralegal who'd been with his firm for 14 years and who carried the kind of binder that says we have been thorough. She set it on the table without ceremony and aligned it precisely with the edge. I wore a blazer. I'd pressed it at the hotel. I drank a coffee beforehand and I ate something, and I reminded myself that my hands did not need to shake today. Delia arrived first with Keely. My mother was in pearls. The same pearls she'd worn the day we buried my father, which I registered and filed away as information. Keely had been crying recently. Her eyes were swollen in a way that suggested the crying had been performative enough to be intended as visible, but real enough to have actually happened. She sat beside my mother and didn't look at me. Brent came in last. He was the only person in the room who moved like someone who still believed this was going to resolve in his favor. He settled into a chair with the loose comfort of a man who'd never personally experienced serious consequences and pulled out his phone before he even put his elbows on the table. Before anyone says anything, Delia started, before anyone sat down, I wanted on record that Marin is being vindictive. She has always been vindictive when she doesn't get her way, and this is... Warren slid the packet across the table. It landed in front of Delia with a clean sound. Co-owner, he said, flat. Quiet. The word fell like a stone into water. Delia picked up the top page. I watched her read it. I watched her read it a second time. I watched her face go through a series of changes. Confusion, then the beginning of comprehension, then something white and strange that I'd never seen on her face before. She had not known about the deed. For a moment, I genuinely felt something like compassion. My father had kept this from her for 6 years, and now it was landing on her in a conference room with a water pitcher and her daughter across the table. That was a hard thing. I acknowledged it internally and then I set it aside because compassion without self-protection had been my primary operating mode for 30 years, and it had deposited me in a hotel room with my grandmother's quilt and a crumpled grocery bag full of my work files. That can't be right, Keely said. It's the deed, Carla said without looking up, filed in the county register 6 years ago. Section 2 identifies Marin Collum as a co-owner with right of survivorship. This is... Brent started. You're not on any relevant documents, Warren said, addressing Brent with the specific, precise courtesy of someone who does not think you are worth losing patience over. This conversation doesn't include you. Brent put his phone in his pocket. Keely turned to me. Her eyes were wet again. Marin, you're really going to do this. You're going to ruin my marriage over a room. Your mother put my grandfather's photograph face down on a concrete driveway. I said, I'm not doing anything over a room. Delia leaned forward. Her pearls moved. You want to make your own mother homeless, your own family. Nobody asked me how I felt, I said. Nobody apologized. Not on the porch. Not in any of those voicemails. Nobody said, Marin, we should have talked to you first. Nobody said, Marin, we're sorry we packed your life in trash bags and called you a moocher in front of the neighborhood. In 7 calls and a dozen texts, the word sorry appeared 0 times. I looked at my mother. That silence told me what I needed to know. Warren folded his hands. My client would like to discuss resolution. What resolution would you like, Marin? I had thought about this, specifically carefully, for approximately 40 of the last 48 hours. Sell the house, I said. Delia laughed. It came out sharp and short like a bark. You cannot be serious. I am entirely serious, I said. I am done financing people who despise me. The house goes on the market. The proceeds are split according to the deed. You receive your portion, I receive mine, and we're finished. We don't have anywhere to go, Keely said. Her voice had gone small. I know, I said. I'm sorry about that, genuinely. But that is a problem that was created the moment someone made the decision to treat me like a piece of furniture who would never push back. Delia didn't speak for a very long time. When she did, her voice was different, lower. The performance had gone out of it. Your father did this, she said. He always trusted you more than me. He trusted me, I agreed. And I spent 3 years trying to earn that by holding this family together with my paycheck. I'm just done now. She didn't have the income to buy me out. I already knew that. Warren had already established it. Keely and Brent had no savings. Keely had sent me a money request on Venmo 6 weeks ago for $400 to help with the catering deposit at the wedding I'd already contributed $200 toward. Their entire plan had depended on one variable, my willingness to keep absorbing the cost of being treated like I didn't matter. That variable had changed. The house was listed within 3 weeks. Margaret Holt of Holt and Breyer Realty, 22 years selling residential property in the county, 3-time top producer, the kind of woman who shakes your hand and immediately identifies which structural thing you've been ignoring, walked through the property, mentioned the remodel I'd done on the main bathroom with a raised eyebrow that suggested she'd expected worse from a house this age, and gave us a number. It was a good number. Good enough that Delia went quiet when she heard it. The market was moving. We had 2 offers by the end of the first weekend. I accepted the better one after consulting with Warren and saying very little to anyone else. Delia texted me, I hope you're satisfied. I looked at the message for a while and decided not to respond, which was the most honest answer I could give. Keely called once, just once, in the 2nd week of the listing. I picked up because I wasn't sure when I'd have the capacity to, again. I just want to know if you hate me, she said. No, I said. I don't hate you. I'm just very, very tired. Keely. I didn't know about the deed, she said. I want you to know that. I believe you, I said. And I did. She cried for a while. I listened. Eventually, I told her I needed to go, and I hung up, and I sat in the temporary apartment I'd rented for 2 months. A one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a complex near the river, with my grandmother's quilt on the bed and my grandfather's photograph on the shelf, and I thought about whether family was something that could be rebuilt from a foundation this cracked. I didn't have an answer. I'm still not sure I do. The closing was scheduled. Documents were prepared. Warren filed everything correctly, walked me through every signature, bought me a terrible cup of coffee from the machine in the hallway afterward, and said, "Your father would have handled this exactly the same way." I didn't know what to do with that, so I just said thank you and held on to it. 2 days before closing, Warren called me at 7:15 in the evening. I knew, the moment I heard his voice, that something had shifted. "Marin," he said, "there's something else." "What kind of something else?" A pause. "The careful kind. Your father left a second letter, also sealed, also separate from the will." Another pause. "It wasn't addressed to you." My stomach dropped through the floor. "Who is it for?" I asked, though I already knew from the shape of the silence. "Keely," he said. "It was to be opened upon the sale of the house, or," and I'm reading directly from his instructions, "upon the event of a significant family dispute." He appears to have anticipated multiple outcomes. I stood in my kitchen for a long time without moving. "What does it say?" "It's sealed," Warren said. "I can't open it without her present." "But Marin," his voice shifted slightly, "your father was specific about sequencing. He wanted this delivered to Keely after resolution." He used that word, after, as if he knew there would be something to resolve. "He did know," I said, quietly. "He knew my mother. He knew all of us." "I'll make the arrangements," Warren said. I hung up and stood at my kitchen window and watched the river for a while. The sky was doing that thing it does in late autumn when the light goes sideways and everything looks simultaneously very beautiful and very far away. My father had prepared for this. He had sat in Warren Bell's office 6 years ago and thought about who his daughters were and what his wife was capable of and what might happen to the people he loved in the space after he was gone, and he had prepared. He had been gone for 4 years and he was still, in some structural way, trying to hold us together. I thought about the framed photograph that had been face down on my driveway, my grandfather, his father, standing in front of a house he'd built with his own hands. My father had that photograph because it had been given to him. He'd given it to me because, I understood this now with a clarity that hurt, he'd given me things because he knew I would keep them. Keely came alone to Warren's office. No Brent, just my sister, in a coat I didn't recognize, sitting across the desk from Warren with her hands in her lap like a kid called to the principal's office. I sat in the corner. Warren had asked if I wanted to be present. I'd said yes, and I'd said I wouldn't speak unless spoken to, and I'd kept that promise. Warren opened the envelope with a letter opener, unfolded the pages, set them on the desk. He read it aloud, slowly. "The way you read something you know matters." My father's voice, on paper, 6 years later. He told Keely he loved her. He said that directly, first, because he'd known she would need to hear it before she could hear anything else. He said he loved her the way you love someone who makes things hard and beautiful at the same time. He said he'd spent a lot of years worrying about her. Then he told her some things about herself that were hard to hear. He wasn't cruel. He was accurate, which is sometimes worse. He told her she had a habit of taking things that were freely given and mistaking that for things she was owed. He said he'd watched it happen, and he'd been complicit in it, and he was sorry for that. He said he'd watched Marin hold the family together in ways that Keely had been able to not notice, because noticing would have required her to do something different, and that not noticing was a choice, even when it felt passive. He said, "I am not writing this to blame you. I am writing this because I love you, and I want you to have a life that is actually yours, built by you, earned by you. And I'm afraid that if no one ever says this clearly, you'll spend 40 years taking things from the people who love you, and wondering why you still feel empty." Keely was crying by the 3rd paragraph, not the performative crying from the conference room, the other kind. He left her something, a separate small account held in trust that he'd contributed to quietly for years, enough to start something with, enough to make a down payment or start a business or take 6 months and figure out who she actually was when she wasn't leaning on someone else's infrastructure. "Use this to build something," he wrote, "not to maintain something that was never yours to begin with." The last line of the letter was addressed to neither of us specifically. It just said, "I believe you're both capable of more than you think. I always did." Keely sat in the chair for a long time after Warren stopped reading. I sat in my corner, and I did not speak. Eventually, she looked over at me, really looked, the way people sometimes do when enough has been said and the masks are down, and I looked back. "I'm sorry," she said, "for the room, for what Mom said, for all of it." "I know," I said. "I believe you." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "What do we do now?" I thought about it, my father's voice still in the room somehow, the letter on the desk. "I think," I said slowly, "you take the money he left you and you build something, and I take my half of the house sale and I do the same. And maybe, not now, not for a while, but maybe eventually we try to figure out if there's a version of us that works, without the old structure." She nodded, not bright, not resolved, just honest. That was enough for now. 3 months later, I signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment 4 blocks from the river. Second bedroom is a home office. Desk, bookshelves, the filing cabinet that had been stuffed in a grocery bag in my old driveway. My grandfather's photograph is on the wall, level and secure. My grandmother's quilt is on my bed. I still work the same job. I still make the same money. The difference is that every cent of it is mine now, spent on my rent, my groceries, groceries, my savings, my future. Not on a mortgage for a house I was allowed to inhabit only as long as I made myself useful and invisible. Delia got her portion of the sale and rented a small place across town. She has not apologized in so many words. She called once, in month 2, and said, "Your father always underestimated me," which I think was the closest she could get. I listened, and I didn't argue, and I said, "I know you loved him, Mom," and I meant it. Keely and Brent are still together, which I hadn't predicted. She texted me a photo last month, the two of them in front of a small storefront, a catering business she's starting with the money from Dad's letter. She looked different in the picture, lighter maybe, like someone who'd put something down. I sent back a thumbs up, and then, after a minute, I sent back, "Dad would have been proud." She replied, "He'd have told us both to get our act together." I laughed at that, actually laughed, the real kind. My father refinanced a house 6 years before he died and put my name on a deed and sealed 2 letters with a lawyer and hoped for the best. He knew us. He knew we'd make a mess of it before we made something better. He prepared anyway. The last thing I did before I left the old house, the very last thing, the day after the porch, before I checked into the Comfort Inn, was take a photo of the driveway, the trash bags, my life in a pile, my grandmother's quilt folded wrong inside a hefty bag. I still have that photo. I don't look at it often, but I keep it, because some things you carry not to suffer, but to remember exactly what you are capable of surviving, and exactly what you refuse to survive again.